My friend Jason, thank you for joining the show. I appreciate your time.
Happy to be here. I mean, we have these conversations all the time, so good to get one recorded for the history books.
Exactly. And so people have heard your bio, but I'd love for you to tell them, a bit more about yourself, especially, one of the things that I'm most fascinated by you is you're kind of prolific in multiple fields. And I love people like that in the sense that you are an incredible runner, incredible athlete, and that's one side of Jason. And then there's also this technical AI founder side. And a lot of people have one of the two, or some people have one of the two, but not a lot have both. So I'd love for you to catch people up to speed on kind of just who you are and what you're interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're getting at is that most of the things that I do these days kind of fall into like three main buckets, I would say. There's like this AI tech startup founder side of me. There's this runner, athlete, coach side of me, and then there's this like community side of me, which I would categorize as like my involvement with the Jewish community, and then all my friends and the individual relationships that I have. I mean, we could talk for hours about any one of them individually, and we have. But I guess I'll just run through each of them really quickly. On the AI startup side, obviously but maybe listeners might not, that I was pretty early to the generative AI game, and you were right there along with us as we were starting in that space. It's like 5 years ago at this point, which is wild to think about. But this was back when kind of we were just making the turn from GPT-2 to GPT-3. We were starting to see that these large language models could string words together and actually write something that was actually coherent in quality and maybe start to write code. And when we were doing it back then, I think people were still pretty skeptical of that. But fast forward to today, and we have folks like yourself who are able to code and create products. And obviously, AI is the talk of the town, both in the technical startup world, but also just in culture in general, which I think is pretty interesting. Then on the running side, I've been a runner for my entire life. When I was like a baby, this is, I guess, from pictures, not exactly from memories, but my parents would push me in the jogger around the neighborhood while they were running. Then when I got older, I would run to the end of the street with them. I would bike alongside them. Then I'd do a full loop around. I did my first 5K, I think, when I was maybe like 8 or 9 in elementary school. Ran it with my dad. Then I think like the next year I ran ahead of him, and it was off from there. Ran in high school, thought about running in college at like a small school, but ended up not doing that, which I'm really grateful for. Got into like long distance running. Again, like another thing that I think I was early to that's like popular in like amongst our friends in culture today is like running marathons, right? I've run like 7 marathons so far. I run like 5 or 6 days a week, and it's a big part of like me and who I am, and it allows me to take a break from the work that I'm doing because I'm constantly working. Um, so much to talk about on that end. And then the last piece is like the community piece. So Jewish community has been huge for me. Was very involved as a student in college with Hillel at Syracuse. Kind of remained involved. Worked at Hillel for a little while. Continue to be involved. And then living in New York City, so many incredible people around here that I get to spend time with, whether it's while running, while coding, while working on projects in community, and everything else. So those are
Yeah.
kind of the three main buckets that make me up, but could go in so many different directions.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, I think traditionally when you think of even those buckets, they would be normally very siloed. And in your case, there's a lot of overlap between the two that you just kind of alluded to. So can you talk a bit more about how these worlds seemingly kind of overlap and inform your life and work? Even, how we'll use our friend Matt Hickman as an example. You meet people through running that then go on to be work people or vice versa. So I'm curious how you balance all those.
Yeah, yeah. So got to shout out Matt Hickman real quick. So a little disclaimer is the two of the closest folks that I work with and spend time with in my life are both named Matt, so it gets a little confusing. There's co-founder Matt, who I started my company with, and there's running Matt, who's this Matt Hickman that we're alluding to now. We met on TikTok. He posted a TikTok when he moved from the West Coast here to New York, and he posted a TikTok like, "Hey, looking for friends. Here's what I'm into." He had a video production company. He was like, I'm into running. Like that was one of the things. So I think I commented. There were like 20 girls that commented, and then I commented. I was like, "Let's go for a run." And we went for a run. He came out to meet me. He was in Brooklyn at the time, so he like took the subway out to meet me. We went for a run around Central Park, and ever since then we've run pretty much every single weekend. And that relationship is, like you were saying, a great example of how these worlds collide. We first met because we're both just like builders, creators who are interested in running. I helped him train for his first marathon, actually, and he's since run another one, and now training for Chicago this year. But we also talk about work together, right? While we're running, that's like an hour or two of uninterrupted time that we're just talking about work, talking through problems, talking about our experiences, learning from each other. And that's so valuable, because I think it's hard for people. I hear this all the time. Like, it's hard to make friends, to meet new people, to engage in new relationships. So running, I found, is like the perfect like proxy to initiate those relationships. And running, Matt, is a great example of that.
Yeah, I think that story is also a great example of, technology, social media being an enabler for connection, because a lot of people view it, and in many cases it can be something that detracts from meeting new people, making new friends. But I think in our world specifically, like, people meet online and bring that online to in real life all the time, and where to people kind of outside, I'd say, that tech founder, Twitter world, even TikTok world, it's very foreign. So I'm curious, as someone who's so close to technology, how you see, whether that's with AI or just broader, things advancing, that both enhancing the kind of connection aspect and then also detracting from it, and then what you need to do to make sure that you're on the right side of that.
Totally. And as you were saying that, I just thought of like more and more examples of how I've done this, like brought relationships from online or meeting someone on Twitter. I even have a story of meeting someone on Clubhouse. Then when I moved to LA, I became friends with him, and he was a YC founder, and we would
Yeah.
run together. So many stories. I think when I think about it, it's so easy to, right, get lost doom scrolling on X and Twitter, on TikTok, on Reels, any of these platforms. You could just scroll forever, and that's kind of what the platforms are optimizing for, because that's how they benefit, is the more time you spend on them. Um, I've, to a varying degree, tried to make sure, or to a varying degree of success, tried to make sure that I don't fall into those traps, and that I take it beyond there. So it's really just not being, the biggest thing for me has been not being afraid to like take the initiative or send the message, right? Like, I could have seen that video and just scrolled past it, but no, I was like, oh, here's an interesting guy. Shoot your shot, right? See what happens. Or my friend Khalil, like I was mentioning before on Clubhouse, I heard him talking about how he was interested in triathlon, and he was starting a startup, and I was like, oh shit, like that's me too. So I just sent him a message, and I think you'll find that the people who are interested in the same things that you are, and willing to take these risks and put themselves out there, maybe they're creating content, they're going to be pretty likely to respond. Um, it's something I'm still working on, though. Like, I don't like to admit this, but yeah, I honestly scroll on my phone for like an hour when I'm in bed before I go to sleep every night.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I deleted TikTok, though. I'd been thinking
Big
about
first
deleting.
step.
Yeah, exactly. It's a funny story with that one too. I was like, I know I spend way too much time on this, but like, it's a nice way to just like turn off my brain for a little. But like, I spend too much time on it. So this was like in January, I guess. I was with a few friends. It was right after the new year, and I was like, I kind of hope they ban TikTok, because I just don't like, it's just too easy, right? I just like fall into. I hope they ban it so I don't even have to deal with it anymore. And one of my friends was like, "Why are you waiting for that? Like just delete it." And I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh shit, you're right." And I just deleted it in that moment. So
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to bias to action in general, like whether that's founding, running, or whatever. A lot of people underestimate the amount of agency that they have in their lives, in the sense of, if there is something that they want to go and change, actually going and making that
yeah,
step is to do it. And I think within that frame of tech specifically, I think one of the things that we've talked about is like my two kind of guiding questions of, hey, is my tech use a problem, are: one, am I going to bed achieving everything that I wanted to achieve, whether that's in life, career, friendships, whatever buckets that you put your priorities in? And then number two is, when I'm using my phone to relax, i.e., before bed or wherever that is, do I leave those periods feeling better than when I started? And in your case, you sounded like, after this 1 hour, I'm like, shit, what did I do? I should have got an extra hour of sleep. None of this
Yeah.
was valuable, whatever that may be. And then you go back and you do it again the next day, and it continues in this cycle. And when you frame that in any other context, whether that's drugs, alcohol, anything that's detrimental to you, that you come back without having, it seems like, that control to go and do so, that's a problem. But with technology, we kind of let it slide. But
Yeah.
I think deleting things, using the brick, a lot of that stuff that, I'll ask you more about, kind of ways that you optimize that in a little bit. But I think all of those are really important steps that, until you just go and do it, it's very easy to say like, all right, I'll start the next day, or I'll start tomorrow. And it never
Totally.
happens.
Totally. It's funny you were talking about like you have agency, you have free will. I've been thinking about that a lot recently. Like this is a bit of an adjacent story example, but my you've been to my apartment. It like faces like just a side street on the Upper West Side, right? And but it's like not a super wide street, so only one lane of cars can fit through at a time. So sometimes trucks will stop, and then they're like cars will line up behind them, and everyone will be honking. This was like a few weeks ago. This happened, and a truck was there. Cars were honking. I'm trying to do my work. The sound's coming in, and I'm like, "What's going on?" So I walked out. I was like, wait, I have free will. I can just like do something about this. I walked downstairs. No one was in the truck, but I found a phone number on the side of the truck, called it, and was like, you have a truck blocking the street and everyone's honking. Can you move it? And they moved it. And I was like, it's just like these reminders. I'm like, oh shit, I can do anything.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, there's this like running thing in like the tech Twitter, like you can just do things, but it's like actually
It's
true.
so true. It's
It's
so
so
true.
true, and a lot of people, whether that's self-limiting beliefs or certain scripts that they've been told, or simply just not realizing that these things are an option because they might be unconventional or unique. You really can just go and do things. So I love that. I'm curious, going back to the tech enabling connection point, have you noticed any examples of AI based products specifically that have done a good job of this? I can start with one that I saw that I thought was really interesting. They've had some kind of, I guess, bad press recently because their AI model wasn't as fine tuned as it should have been. But it's a company called Bordy,
Okay.
which you essentially call it, and it's a voice chat bot, and you say, "Hey, I'm a founder. I'm looking to connect with VCs," or "Hey, I'm a graphic designer. I'm looking for more clients." And it will use that input to go and search through its database and make the connection for you and set up meetings. And apparently they have a very high hit rate because it uses a lot of the context to actually go and make these connections at scale. I thought that that was a really interesting way of, one, voice, and kind of making it fairly frictionless for the people who are comfortable speaking on a phone, but also, again, being able to do that at scale. So I'm curious if there's any other examples that you've seen
Yeah. Sorry, just to clarify, examples of.
of like AI powered tools. You could think of like social 2.0, or just like other kind of tech based tools that are enabling connection between people.
So I haven't partaken in this, but it's something I'm really interested in. And I guess I haven't participated because I have it naturally. But there's a lot of really cool little companies and groups that are like matching people for these dinners. I don't know if you've seen this concept. And we
Yeah,
do this like in our life naturally. So this isn't something that I like have used, though I maybe should just try it. I think that's really interesting because I think a lot of people feel like maybe they don't have the connections or they don't want to just reach out to someone random. There are these really cool, and I wish I had some of them specifically, but there are these
I can
really
tell you,
cool.
I've went deep on this, so
You got them covered, yeah. But like I think that's really interesting, right? Because some people, if you're like just jumping into this and you know this is something you're interested in, but you're not just gonna like reach out to random people, you can look into one of these. And I've heard that they do a really good job of like matching people based on interests, who you're most likely to connect with. And I think that's a fantastic way to bridge the gap between the technology and you can just keep scrolling, right? Or you can actually go in real life.
Yeah, one of the companies, I think probably maybe the one that you're thinking of, but it's definitely the biggest that I've seen, is called Time Left.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
they went from $0 to $10 million ARR in literally less than a year. There was like a story preceding that where they raised around, they pivoted a few times, figured it out. But like once it hit, it hit. And similar to what you said, they have an intake form. There's a little, a front end app. They use some type of, I don't know if it's AI matching or whatever it is on the back end to essentially just match strangers up for dinner. And since then, they've expanded to like 60 countries, 300 cities, and many different companies have kind of sprouted off from that because the idea itself is not very novel and it's fairly easy to execute, like you said. But there's tons of companies popping up now doing the same thing. And it seems like they all have, they're running paid ads and they're getting audience that way, but like, it seems like they all have demand. Like people really just want an excuse to meet new people and they don't want to be the someone who takes the initiative to go do it, but they'll happily go and show up for it and pay
Yeah,
for it.
I remember the first time I actually heard about this concept was from these guys when I was living in LA. They started this one called it's the number 222 dot place.
Mm-hmm.
That's one the first time that I remember hearing about this. But totally agree. It's like now there's not the excuse of like, oh, I have to figure out who to reach out to, or I have to find friends to introduce me to other people. I can just go to one of these services and they'll match it up for me. This does remind me, though, I love this idea of like friend curation. So like Matt, who we were talking about earlier, does a really good job of this. It's like, oh, I know someone who you should talk to about this because you have this, and it's like this idea of like curating friends for other people. Um, it's kind of like that idea, but operationalizing it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's something that I try to do all the time, even like with the kinds of events, like, go around the room, say, oh, you are interested in XYZ, or oh, you run XYZ business, you guys should definitely talk. And I think that, a warm intro goes a very long way, especially even just breaking down those initial barriers of awkwardness in terms of people who might be less comfortable with speaking to strangers. Once you have that shared connection, it makes it a hell of a lot easier.
Totally. I think the other thing is really finding the communities that are focused on the things that you're interested in, right? So for me, it's like running and triathlon. I have an example the other day, right? So I'm like keeping an eye on these spaces, seeing what's new,
Yeah.
seeing who's building interesting things, and reaching out to them. The a few weeks ago, I saw someone on Reddit on the triathlon subreddit who was working on this cool project where he was like taking a video and doing like aerodynamic testing on his bike from just a video, which typically it'd require like thousands of dollars of technology. And I like messaged him on Reddit, and then we talked, and now we've sort of become friends. Or like some of the projects that I've worked on, like Roast My Strava was a great example that we've
Yeah.
talked about before. That was like another way for me to meet people. I met so many people just around the world who are interested in the same things that I'm interested in, just because I put this out there and put it out there in a way that I was open to receiving those connections.
100%. I mean, and all of that building, whether it's products, content, like that's all in the form of creation as a whole. And I think, we've talked again before, like all screen time isn't created equal. Hours that you spend creating, whether you're, cooped up 10 hours on your computer, that is a vehicle to go and do all these cool things, unlock these cool opportunities. But then there's also the flip side of that where things like the chatbots, Replica, Character AI. We were talking about the Sesame model, which personally I
Yeah.
wrote about today. Like I was fucking blown away by it. I know you weren't as impressed, and I'd love to actually hear you elaborate on it. But like that's what really worries me because as this stuff gets more human-like, for the people who are a bit more reserved, scared of that initial connection. There's a lot of emotions that come along with relationships. It's not convenient. Not everyone's around. It's really easy to go and speak to a bot that remembers everything about you, sounds increasingly human. And for a while, I was like, one, these people are weird as hell. Two, I can't like see a world in where this happens. And after speaking to the Sesame one specifically,
Yeah.
personally, I'm not going to be on there 2 hours a day, but I was like, oh, wow, I kind of get it. Like, I can see what's going on here. And that really frightens me.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think it can be really positive in so many ways and for a lot of people, but also, yeah, it makes it easier to kind of avoid the real world. I sometimes I go on a walk every morning around the neighborhood, and usually I'm listening to a podcast or something. But sometimes if I'm like working through an idea or just want to talk, I will have ChatGPT voice mode in my AirPods, just walking around talking to it. And I think that's where it's really useful. It's just like on demand, a way to bounce ideas off each other. You talked about Sesame, which I agree is super cool. And was reading what you wrote about it. You were writing about the uncanny valley, which is like this space where it's like so close to being realistic, but like there are still these little tells. And I think that's why I was a little bit turned off by it. Like I agree, it's the best thing that's out there, but I think part of what turned me off about it was that it was so close without getting there. Whereas when I'm talking to ChatGPT voice mode, it's like, okay, like we're having a conversation, but I know this is like a robot. I know
Right.
this is AI. When I'm talking to Sesame, I'm like, okay, it sounds like a human, but there's still like a few extra like pauses and things that like make me uncomfortable. Does that make sense? It's like it's
Yeah.
like so in this case, until it's all the way there, I almost, and I probably will change my mind on this in like a week, so don't hold me to it. But like, I almost like the more kind of AI robotic, like formulaic, because I'm like, okay, I know this is not a real person.
Yeah. What do you think it looks like when you say all the way there? Like outside of those pauses, right? Like, little things. What does that really mean? Is it adding a image, live video component to it where you're seeing kind of the facial nuances and expressions? Is it you getting a bit more granular on like reasoning and critical thought? Like what is an emotion? Like what is that next frontier that you think?
Yeah, I think I mean, personalization is something I've been big on for a while. So I think it's that it really knows you. And we see a bit of that, right? With ChatGPT, with voice mode. I don't know. I have to look into this a little more, but I don't know if Sesame actually like has a product, right? They just released this as like a research demo, so I'm not entirely sure what they're. Do you know what the product they're going for is?
Yeah, it's that voice demo model will power glasses.
Okay, cool.
So it's a
So
hardware AR play.
yeah, so that's where you get into the visual. Yeah, I think it's personalizing. It's like knowing you super super well, and then kind of getting ahead of things. I think is really interesting, right? Instead of it just responding to you, it's like being proactive. So when you bring in the vision, it's like based on what you're seeing, it's like proactively saying something.
Yeah.
Um, and then it's just like this. I've been thinking a lot about like the concept of building a world view, right? A large language model has a world view, but it's constrained until you attach tools to it. It's constrained to the information that it was initially trained on. But then when you attach tools, it can do live search. When you attach tools like memory, it can do personalization, right? But when you attach a live view, it's like has that worldview, the same worldview you do. It's taking in the same information, um, and that's exciting and interesting. And
Yeah,
also,
I mean,
always get
I tagged it in today's post too, but like that friend, the AI friend
yes,
necklace,
yeah,
that's very similar where I think they have a camera on it and it's able to contextualize a lot of the things around you, pull in the audio and what's people speaking. It's essentially like wearing a wire and a camera. I
yeah.
hate that. I
Okay,
really,
dude, I just realized this. I literally have my Ray-Ban Meta glasses right here next. I did not plan this. Right here next to me, and they do have a worldview, and I can like ask them to like. I don't know if it's on right now, but hey, Meta, what do you see? So I don't think you can hear it, but it can like see it like can take a picture and see
and I
the
think that
screen.
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Like for some reason that, and I've actually wanted to get a pair of those. That seems very different to me than wearing like a wire friend from like a companion. Like that seems like an assistant kind of guiding you, or I would normally pull out my phone to ask ChatGPT something question. That's kind of doing it with and eliminating the friction. Having
Yeah.
the friend, especially in the trailer that they do, where it's like, she's like meeting her first date and the thing's talking to her, like the guy's losing in video games and it sends him a message like, hey, you're getting your ass kicked. Like that's weird. And especially because in that trailer specifically, they're pulling out their phone in order to go and check that message, it's
Yeah.
pulling them away from that present moment. And I think that that's something that really, one, is detrimental, and it just like decreases the presence and the ability to enjoy the real moment. But two, it's just weird. It's a very weird thing. Maybe again, my mind will change, but I think it's just very weird.
Yeah, hardware and wearables are so interesting, right? Like I'm more software than hardware, but I find it so interesting. And we saw very just recently the humane pin failed.
Yep,
We've seen that little rabbit box. I don't know if they're still kicking it, but
got to be
I wasn't
gone.
very
Yeah,
impressed. Uh, on one hand, it makes sense that it would fit into something we're already wearing and using. So that's starting with our phone and then going to the glasses that we're already wearing. But at the same time, I like to think about history a lot. If you went back in time and told everyone that we would have this mini magic box in our pocket that we'd take off, like people think that's crazy. So I do agree that I think the most successful tools in the short to midterm will be ones that really naturally integrate and are add-ons to things we already have, like glasses, like phones, obviously. But I do think that there could be like something that we're not expecting, and something very new, and maybe it's phones and glasses, and then it's Neuralink implant. Like maybe that's like the actual
yeah.
next like phase
I
change.
do think that something that like that's very much on the horizon. Obviously, it exists now for people with very specific conditions at a much more controlled state, but I could easily see that being a consumer thing in the especially the way that things are evolving. And I'm sure a lot of people hearing this will be like, "You're, fucking crazy." But especially with the way things are evolving, I wouldn't be shocked to see that be a thing in like 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy even now just going on the subway and like looking around, everyone is head down in their phone, has their AirPods in, is right like walking around, everyone has their AirPods in. Like that's kind of dystopian even of itself if you like take a step back and think about it. Like I don't go
100%.
anywhere without my AirPods in unless I'm with someone else.
Yeah, I mean, losing my AirPods was actually one of the biggest blessings of my life. I lost them at the gym, and then I
Yeah.
stopped using them because I had just bought a new pair. I didn't feel like buying it again. Now I use the wired headphones, but there was a chunk where I just was like headphoneless for a long time, besides like my over ears that I would use for work.
Yeah.
And you would be amazed. Like that's a good challenge for people too. If you are someone who's kind of relying on always popping the earbuds in, to just take that out, and like a lot of the small talk that you'll get with like a barista when you're getting your coffee, or like even, there was someone on the street that was like a few days ago, I think on Valentine's Day, that was like screaming at her boyfriend, like in, classic New York crazy person, like
Yeah.
so loud. You could hear her three blocks down. And, me and the guy next to me like looked at each other being like, yeah, damn, that's great. He was like, she must have had a terrible Valentine's Day. And like we talked for like a block and then we went our separate ways. But if you have your AirPods in, all of those little connections that are already becoming increasingly or decreasingly apparent happen far less. And so that's been a great exercise for me to like be able to take that out, be a bit more present, and have those conversations. And on that note, I'm curious, with one, you're being able to see kind of the dystopian nature of it. And I think it is one of those things that when you see it, it's like hard to unsee. But two, someone who is like so deep into tech, we obviously just nerded out about it for like 20 minutes. Like, how do you put those guardrails in your own life? And are there certain practices that you do either on a daily basis or weekly that you stay mindful of, especially as all this new stuff is coming into the fold?
Totally. And I could always be doing more, and that's why I love reading your newsletter and hearing about what you're working on and following along because I want to be better at it, right? When you ask that question, the first practices that I have that come to mind are around like physical activity and getting myself out of my apartment, right? Because when I'm in my apartment, I'm in front of my computer usually, right? Or I have like screens or things to do, right? But when I get out, I'm kind of in the world. Even if I have my AirPods in, I'm in the world. So two practices that I would say: one is the morning walk. I think I alluded to it earlier. I started doing that. I mean, that's been a thing for a while, but I have not missed a day since the beginning of 2024, like January 1st,
Wow.
2024. I've gone on a morning walk or run if I'm running in the morning, but usually I run later, every single day. So I'll like check my phone, but then I'll like go for a walk every morning.
I love that.
That's a big one for me, because then I'm not just getting right into the being on my computer, right into work, and then it's because it's impossible to get away once
Yeah,
I'm.
I am the biggest victim of that ever.
So I always tell people, especially if you're fortunate enough to like work from home, um, make sure you like get outside and do the morning walk. The other one is like the opposite end of my day. It's the runs, right? Obviously, it comes as no surprise, but running is another time where I can't be in front of my computer, so it forces me to get away. Runs are where I process ideas, where I think of new ideas, where I see the world. Like I'll be running in Central Park and I'll run past hundreds, if not thousands of people, and I'll just start thinking to myself, like, what can I, like, how are all these people using AI in their lives? What can I build to make for these people? And just like breaking out of whatever problem I was focused on at my computer, giving me a new perspective. So those are my two initial responses, which is just like get outside, get myself moving, and then when I come back, I'm gonna do better work, and it gets me away.
Yeah, so it sounds like the run is something sorry, the walk is something that's definitely scheduled. You set it at a time. With the run, do you block that out in the calendar, or do you have like a sign when you're deep in work, you might be like too far up against a problem, you've been in it for too long, you need to step away. Like, is there a sign that you say, all right, now I'm gonna go for the run and recalibrate? What does that look like?
It varies. It varies. These days, I'm running kind of like late afternoon after work, taking a break from work. But like for example, I'm gonna go for my run right after we finish this actually today, which is a little earlier than usual because it's going to rain later. I did a lot of work this morning. I want to take a break and then I'll come back to work after. So it really depends on my schedule. But there'll be some days where I am like so frustrated or I'm in a terrible mood. Like you can ask the people who I work with on a daily basis. I'm in like a terrible mood and I'll be like, okay, I'm just like slams, like the slams laptop shut. For me, it's like slams laptop shut and going for a run because
Yeah,
that's just going to make me better. And the people who work with me know that too. So they will encourage me to do that as well.
100%. There's an app that's been going viral that I actually meant to send to you. I don't know if
Yeah.
you saw it. Have you seen the Touch Grass app?
I saw a version of that on Reddit a while ago. I wonder if it's the same thing though.
So I think there was someone who built it like some very similar product probably like a year ago, 2 years ago, and this is even a testament to the importance of distribution and content and
Yeah.
marketing. But then this other like little indie hacker guy from the UK built it, better UX, made a post of essentially it's like a screen time blocker app, but in order to go and unlock the apps, you need to
Yeah.
take a picture of yourself touching actual grass, and it blew up. I mean, like number one on Hacker News, a million views
Yeah.
on Twitter, like just everywhere. But I actually think that something like that is really interesting, not for the app blocking contest, but like if you're able to, just riffing here, but like
Yeah.
find out a way where if you are too deep in your computer for so long, like it forces you to go out and just like get some air.
Well, that sort of, I'll tie this back to what we were talking about earlier, which is I really think that the next kind of breakthrough in the way we interact with AI is it being proactive, right? If it's looking at what you're doing and it kind of identifies that pattern, it can be proactive to prompt you instead of waiting for you to open ChatGPT and go talk to it. So I think those concepts actually tie together really nicely. I'm curious if this touch grass one, if that's more like a gimmick fun thing or if that actually like keeps people, right? Because I've tried, and I think we've talked about this before, but I've tried the like setting screen limits, it just like in the normal, the terminology better than I
Yeah,
do, but in the normal, like the way that my iPhone allows me to set limits on different apps. I've
yeah,
tried that before and it didn't work because I would be like 5 more minutes, ignore for today.
yeah.
So I'm really interested in all these types of apps that you're talking about. I know you know all of them. You've experimented with building some in that space too, and are working on some new projects. That's kind of the place for me where I run into these issues though is it really needs to come from like an intrinsic like no I know I need to take a break, no I know I'll feel better after I do this, no I know this is too much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the way that I look at it is it's all about the level of friction that you need to throw at the problem, or you need to put in between yourself and the problem. So for example, the native screen time or the native Apple tools, like you said, there's very low, near zero friction. Even if you have like decent willpower some days, you can go click in, and then once you're in, you're in. That's why I love the brick, because there is kind of this physical component of, if I am not around my brick, if it is at home or in the city and I'm in Westchester, wherever I am, I cannot go and get to it. I
Yeah.
think the touching grass thing adds an element of that friction, in the sense of, you need to go outside, you need to get up, actually going and doing that, especially if you're like deep in a problem, or you're like kind of in that zone, is very hard to do. Obviously there's some workarounds. People have been like, what if I take a picture of digital grass? Like, what if I'm on turf? Like, what if I don't have grass near me? Like, there's a lot of things that need to be figured out there. But I do think that, like you said, something that is able to take in the context and then place a really, really hard blocker, like something with a lot of friction, will be more effective. In this case, I do think the touch grass thing is more of a gimmick. Time will tell. Like, he didn't even have the app ready. That was a demo. There's like a
Yeah.
pre-order coming out, and we'll see what the conversion rate is on that. But another tool that I saw was interesting was, we all are like hunched over our computers all day, right? Like, my posture is terrible. This
Yeah.
guy built some type of like sensor thing that he had strapped to his back, that if he wasn't in good posture, it would block his computer screen. And I think that is really interesting. Again, in the idea of like, if you do have something that can take in context, and it notices that you've been sitting in the same spot
Yeah.
for 5 hours, then it blocks your computer screen and forces you to go outside. So I
Yeah.
think that combination of, again, like ingesting the context around you, and then providing enough friction that you actually can't go and resume what you're doing until you go and do that thing. That, in my opinion, is a recipe for success. But the
Yeah.
people who want to use it need to know that that's what they're getting themselves into. And so you need
Right.
someone who's really taking that seriously in order to go do that, which I don't think is a bad thing. You just need to find the right person.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like a bunch of these examples are that we've given so far are very like rules based, right? Like it's like, if your posture is poor, block the screen until
Yeah.
posture no longer poor, or if spent too much time on computer without going outside, or spent a certain amount of time, go out, like block until you touch, whatever. What I'm actually interested in these AI models make this possible is, what if it's like listening to how I'm speaking and can pick up on patterns that like either I know of or I'm ignoring, that I'm like speaking in specific ways that I'm like getting frustrated, or I'm going in circles on the same task. So it's not just like very simple rules based, it's more flexible. I think that would work
Mm-hmm.
really well for someone like me, because sometimes I like know that I need, like that I'm getting frustrated and that I need to take a break, but like to have that reminder, if it could like sense that would be
100%. I mean, I was telling you the same idea, and right now it's technically unfeasible. Maybe one day it will be, but like, I always thought it would be really interesting to be able to cross tabulate, cross examine your screen time data with all of the other health data. So like, being able to see when your heart rate's spiking, being a lot of those other contextual clues that you're bringing up, whether that's with speech, whether that's with your workout patterns, and a lot of the other health data, and being able to see how a lot of these habits actually stretch across the spectrum of wellness, as opposed to being confined just into this thing of like, oh, your dopamine receptors are fried, or you're not as present. And I think that would be a massive unlock for a lot of people, because especially the we'll call them like high performers, even though I hate that term, high achievers, they've kind of mastered the art of doing deep work and building something really impressive. They tend
yeah.
to be generally very healthy. They tend to have their life in order, and be investing in the right relationships, and hopefully, building family around them. The one thing that a lot of them can't crack is the tech side of things, because it's so integrated into all of those other things. But I think when you go and see it in kind of this bigger picture of, here's how this is actually harming me, not anecdotally, but quantitatively, there's a lot of really interesting kind of like, oh shit moments and catalyzing moments that come from that. So I would love to build that. Right now, the only way to do that is with user logging, which I think is a lot of friction for someone to go and log all of their screen time. But if that API ever did expand, and they give you that access, I think that's something that's really interesting.
I think that's, I mean, yeah, it's going to happen. And that just, for me, like hearing you talk about that really solidifies the connection between that, like, your digital health has with your mental health, with your physical health, right? Because as you're talking, I'm like, oh, like when I'm like coaching someone or thinking about someone who's training for a marathon, it's not just like the runs they're getting in. It's like the runs, the recovery, the rest, the stress, right? It's like all these pieces together. So it just solidifies like how important the stuff that you're working on is in building like your holistic health.
100%.
um, as we've been talking, I've been like thinking of so many other like stories and things that I want to talk about. Like I look to my right and I don't know if you noticed this in my apartment before, but I have like a bunch of sticky notes around.
Yeah, I have seen this.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. But like those are some of my reminders. I have two that are next to each other. One says post more content and one says chill. They're like my like
Two
two.
wolves.
Exactly, exactly. But I have them like all around my apartment. I have one on my bedroom door that says more side quests because I like need that reminder, even though it sounds like I do all these things and I'm going out there and talking to people and meeting people. I like still need that reminder to keep doing it and do uncomfortable things because that's where these really cool opportunities come from usually.
100%. And I think that's a good segue into, we'll round this all up. A couple rapid fire questions. I'll throw them at you. You can go as brief or deep as you want, but they're in the digital wellness sphere. So we can jump right in. But what's the last app you deleted from your phone and why?
Ooh, the last app I deleted from my it was probably someone one that I just tested. Um, which means I can't really come up with it right now. But this brings up a really interesting thing, which is people don't delete apps from their phones. Actually,
Ever.
usually, like I do because I'm like testing all these apps and I don't want them to take up space. But most people never delete apps from their phone.
I don't. I have like a graveyard. I probably use, like the Pareto principle, whatever, like 20% use 80% of the time. I think
Yeah,
for me, it's like 1% or 0.05% I use like 90% of the time. Like there is so much stuff on there,
yeah,
which is honestly another interesting idea for a phone. I wonder if you put a constraint on storage,
mm,
how much people would use things.
yeah.
Um, so I'm
Also,
always thinking of like, how can you put constraints on certain things to allow you to use it less? I
yeah,
wonder if storage is an interesting one.
yeah. That is interesting. I guess my answer might be TikTok. I'm sure I deleted apps since then, but I did delete TikTok like a month or two ago. So
Fair enough. We'll go with that. If you had to disconnect completely for a month, what's the first thing you would do?
I would move to the mountains. Um, and I would read, write, and run.
It's a good combo. A lot of alliteration there. What's one piece of tech that you secretly love and one that you think is overrated? Could be hardware, software, whatever, an app.
Oh, good question. I don't know if any of these are secrets. Like I talk about everything that I love. I don't know. I don't have a good answer.
All right, we'll
You're
wrap
busting
it.
my head.
You already answered this one, so we'll skip it. If you only had to use, this is the last one piece of technology for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Is it a technology like a device, an app? Like what is it? What do you define? How do you define this?
I think you can go in either direction, but it would, I'd imagine, be more of an app because if you have your phone with no apps, it could only be so you'd be using it in the phone context.
Yeah.
So it could be like a
Um,
coffee maker, like it doesn't need to be in the realm of
yeah.
phones and computers, just a piece of technology.
Okay, I'll go with my GPS running watch then.
Fair enough. Yeah, if you're going to be on an island only running,
Yeah.
reading, and
Yeah,
writing,
gotta make sure I can track my training.
exactly. All right. Well, Jason, thank you. I appreciate the time. I think we could probably riff for like 3 hours. So I think this is a good place to stop. But if you want to tell listeners where they can find you, given the fact that you like bringing connections in real life or from online to in real life, they want to reach out, they can do that. Of course, HyperWrite, all that type of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, just search my name. LinkedIn is like my biggest platform, I guess, but I'm open to receiving messages anywhere. I guess the plug I'll say is if anyone is in New York and wants to go for a run, hit me up and let's do that.
I love it. I bet people actually will. And my friend Adam, who I introduced you to, is definitely going to be in town. So that'll be a good one.
Exactly.
All right,
That's
cool. Jason, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Randy.
All right, I'll stop this.